Okay, Ralph, here I go again. You're not going to like this. I know you disagree with me. You know, I know you think I'm an idiot and this is insane. But the more I look around at the world and what's happening now in the Western world, the more I just can't help but see a certain pattern. And I don't think it's going in a good direction. And it's a pattern I call the squeeze. Let me start with a little anecdote that is completely reasonable and innocuous and harmless and even makes sense. A couple of years ago, grocery stores in Germany, well, at least here in Berlin, and especially like my Edeka. You know, Edeka is this big chain of grocery stores. They started putting certain things behind glass, specifically whiskey. Now, Ralph, you know I like my whiskey. And so now when I go in there and I want to get a whiskey, it's a higher price item. You know, it's not, I mean, even the cheap whiskey is behind glass, but I can't afford the expensive whiskey, but all the whiskey is behind glass. So I have to go to the whiskey cabinet. I have to ring a bell. I have to wait till the person comes with a key. I have to tell him what I want. He has to take it out from me, unlock the cabinet. And then he takes the whiskey and he goes with it to the cashier and puts it behind the cashier. So now there are maybe 5 cashiers, and there's also self-checkout somewhere, and there are big lines in front of the cashiers, and I have to go to the cashier and wait in line for the cashier that he's chosen from me, not the one that has the smallest line or whatever. And then when I get there, I have to remember to, oh, by the way, that whiskey bottle behind the register, that's for me. And so it's an inconvenience. It's a small inconvenience. And of course, it's a guide against shoplifters, right? So there's more shoplifting. And Edeka has absolute right and to guard against shoplifting because they want to make a profit. And if they can't make a profit, the grocery store would disappear and we wouldn't be able to get groceries. So I want them to be successful and not to suffer from shoplifting. But the result is that I have to wait at the whiskey cabinet. I have to go to the line, wait in line. I have to remember, because now I've done my other shopping, that I have to remember to get to ask the whiskey. So I have to ask several people. I have to wait in line several times. And every time I do it, I have the feeling that basically Edeka and a lot of other grocery stores out there doing that today think I am a criminal. The default is that their customers are basically criminals, and they have to be treated as criminals. The criminal part of their customers is higher than the part of the customers that is normal paying. So I fall into that category. I am now a criminal whenever I go into Edeka. And so, it's not necessary to say that I don't like going in there anymore, and I buy my whiskey and my other groceries elsewhere. But it's just this default. In order to keep their profits up, which is fair game, they have to look at me as a criminal and restrict what I can do and make it harder for me to do something in order for them to reach their goals. Now let's switch to politics. In politics, for some time now, I mean, you've seen it, the entire woke movement, there has been a strong tendency to take certain groups and to vilify them in general, to make clear that certain groups are probably the default of certain groups is evil. And I've been hit this, of course, I noticed this as a white male. First of all, I'm white, therefore I'm probably racist. And if you look at critical race theory in America, it very much implies and often says directly that if you're white, you are a racist because of systemic racism and you can't help it. All you can do is try to fight it by, doing what they tell you to do. And so by default, I am a racist, which makes me a bad person. I'm a bad person by default. So people look at me and I look at myself and I'm worried about saying certain things. I'm worried about making certain jokes. I'm worried about exaggerating things. And you know that, when I make jokes, when I try to entertain people, I exaggerate things. And I say things that maybe are a little bit shocking intentionally. But now I'm afraid of doing that. because the default is I am evil because I'm white. I'm also a male. And so males are rapists, since Me Too, the default of the male has been the male is evil. So I have to kind of justify myself. I have to watch what I say and be careful. I have to worry constantly about doing something that will set off the alarms. We got him. He's the racist. He's the sexist. He's evil. We got him. The default has become such that I have to justify myself. And this has become bigger and bigger in America and in Germany, as you know, and it's become more than just white males. It's all kinds of things. It's a huge collection of things that by default are evil, and the result is never that things get better. There are not less rapes. There is not less racism. There's only more racism, and there's more misogyny, and everything becomes worse. So the more the default is that we are evil, the worse things we get. So it's not the state or the society in general that profits from this, that gets better. It's just that the individual now has to really watch what he says and what he does. A good example of this is here in Germany, the Colleen Fernandez case. You know it well. You know it better than I do. A minor TV star accused her ex-husband of putting deepfake images or imitating herself online, pretending to be her online, and then engaging with other men in sex in her name to degrade her, and sending naked photos of her that appeared to be nude photos of her to other men in order to degrade her. And of course, we know what this is. It's revenge porn. We've had revenge porn since the dawn of the internet. The case itself is a minor case. That happens all the time, and it's terrible and disgusting. And it's horrific that this guy who was kind of popular, the husband is a TV star, was kind of popular. It's shocking that this guy that we kind of all liked and he had a good sense of humor and he was funny, is such this horrible, horrible person. Okay, good. But the case itself was minor. The thing that was interesting was the reaction to the case. Immediately, politicians, feminist activists, and others, mainly on the left, immediately came out into the forefront. Also journalists came out and said, we need more laws. They were calling for more laws against deepfake images. They said, deepfake, that was the big thing. Deepfake is evil. We've had that for some time now, and we have privacy laws in Germany. It may well be that we need a separate law for deepfake images. Okay, that's possible. But the reaction was, one, to vilify men, to make it clear that all men are basically evil, potentially evil, and two, to call for more laws, to use that to make more laws. And when I say they vilified men, I know you don't believe me, but they were like the discussion came up. I had discussion with women about all men are potential rapists. I'm shocked, and I look at my husband and I think, is he a potential rapist? People are saying that. Why, if you think he's a potential rapist, why did you marry him? What are you talking about? A activist organization, Compact, put out posters and ads saying, your husband, a rapist. Accusing just kind of generally everyone of every man of being basically, by default, a rapist. And so, parallel to that, they started suggesting that we need more laws. And these laws included laws like femicide, so homicide laws. In Germany, of course, murder is illegal, no matter who the victim is. The homicide laws were not enough. We need femicide laws. So we need laws against specifically murdering women. In America, I think 70 to 80% of all murder victims are men. But there's no special law against man-only homicide. And in Germany, it's a little bit less. I think it's 60% of murder victims are men. 40% of murder victims are women. The men are always going to be the ones who will be murdered more. And yet we need specific laws for women, femicide laws, because it's such a pandemic of murder and of rape. And then new words came out, were invented. I think some of these words were slightly older, but they became more popular. Digital rape. So Colleen Fernandez encouraged the use of this word, digital rape. I think she said it herself. Maybe she didn't say it herself, but people said she was digitally raped. I thought, wait a minute, digitally raped? How does digital rape work? At the same time, or a couple months later, it came out police statistics about rape. There, I don't know, 10,000 rapes or something like that in Germany a year, and very strange statistics. There are about 750 gang rapes a year, group rapes, where there were more than one man raping a woman, taking turns to rape the woman. But that didn't get anyone enraged. No one called for new laws because of that. They called for new laws because of digital rape. So here we have the whole Germany getting upset about digital rape and digital violence. But, 750 gang rapes. It shocked me that it has a special category, gang rapes. A year, that was not so much of a problem. The problem is digital rape. So we have a new vocabulary. Anything that happens online, which doesn't actually happen, is real violence. And we need more laws. And, it was used to vilify men in general. So it was used to create a group of evil, potentially, basically, inherently evil people, so that we could create laws to control and supervise and educate and change and restrict that group of people, because all of the people in that group are potentially evil. And then there's the question of how far this will go. Now you can say, Eric, you're exaggerating. It's not going to go off into some big thing, some big 1984 thing or something. This is not going to be, the ultimate surveillance. This is just a small thing, and it makes sense, and it's just restricted to one little thing, catching pedophiles. Okay, my problem with that is, I don't know of many laws in the history of lawmaking that were decreased or stopped. But I know a lot of laws that were increased and expanded year for year. Every new generation of lawmakers come in and they want to save the world. They want to make the world a better place and make society a better place. So they start thinking of new laws that they can make, like femicide, to solve the problems, and this will solve the problems. And they, as lawmakers, they feel good about themselves. They get more votes, and they get attention and applause and all that all that stuff. That's all natural for every new generation of lawmakers. So a law like free speech laws in Europe, you've had these free speech laws like anti-blasphemy laws since the Middle Ages. You cannot insult or criticize the church. So that's an anti-blasphemy law. And anti-blasphemy laws have been, Napoleon removed them in France, for example. And in Germany, they are not as strong as they were in the Middle Ages. You can probably, under certain circumstances, you could burn a Quran in Germany, but under other circumstances you couldn't. It would depend on the circumstances, So it's, the laws like this are tempered with freedom laws, with democratic laws also, but they're still there. And if they're there, they can be built upon. They can be expanded. And that's what we do. We expand those laws. When the internet came in, the Germans immediately jumped on it and said, hey, we can make laws here. We can make laws restricting speech. And so the restriction of speech in Germany and in a lot of European countries via the internet has gone into huge numbers, much more than there was before the internet, because that's more opportunity. And so they pass more laws for to apply to this opportunity and make freedom of speech, to restrict freedom of speech more. Here are the numbers. In 2025, in the UK, I think 12,000 arrests were made based on free speech laws, free speech in the internet. 12,000. In Germany, 2025, there were, I think, 10,000 cases recorded by the police for hate laws in the internet. I think 20,000 for political laws in the internet, political speech in the internet, and 250,000, that's 500,000, for insult laws, for defamation laws, for calling someone an asshole or insulting a politician. 500,000 cases. About 20 to 30% of those cases in Germany were successfully prosecuted. That's a huge number and a huge opportunity for the state to just harass the citizens for, saying an opinion online. Let's compare that to a state that we consider maybe a fascist state or a totalitarian state or a non-democratic state. In Russia in 2025, there were only about 260 cases of cases, police cases based on free speech laws. 250. Is that a problem? I think it's a problem. So what will happen if we put laws in place now that restrict freedom of speech even more than it is already restricted? If we put in more tools for the state to use in hunting down people who transgress freedom of speech laws, what will happen in the future? And you can say, you're exaggerating. It's not going to get any worse. If you consider that in most cases, laws are expanded, not decreased, but increased, not decreased, then the next generation of people are going to come and they're going to say, we have here chat control laws that look for pedophiles, and they're successful because we find 2 more pedophiles a year, and that's good. Well, then why can't we expand that to murder, to tax evasion, to theft, domestic abuse? And all that makes sense. To expand it then to those things, it makes sense because we want to stop murder and domestic abuse and tax evasion. And so if we control all chat messages sent, we might find some of these guys. And so it makes sense. And so then the next generation comes and says, well, we've expanded it now to murder and all this. But, if AI has enough data to find these guys, it has enough data to predict who is going to do it. So we can predict who the murderer will probably be. Of course, we wouldn't persecute someone for a murder that he hasn't committed yet, but we can watch him. We can send police to his house and say, we know you're thinking about murdering your wife. Watch it. We're on your tail. Maybe we can even put little, a GPS, signal on his leg or on his car or something. So if we have the data, we can use the data to make the world a better place by predicting people who are going to do bad things. And then that's in place and everyone says, well, okay, good. That's, as long as there's no abuse or there's a minimum of abuse of it, that's fine. And then the next generation comes along and say, well, when we're talking about murderers and rapists and all these guys that we're catching with, AI searching the internet, at the same time, basically all these guys who were doing all these things, murdering, they're just bad people. I mean, you could put them all into, these are bad people. And so the problem of society is not specifically a murderer, it's bad people in general. So why don't we use AI to find out who the bad people are? If a guy is, if someone says, I don't like migrants. Okay, well, okay. That's something, but that's very close to I hate people with a different skin color, which is actual racism. And then I hate people with a different skin color, which is racism, is very close to Nazis. We have to put all people of different skin color in concentration camps. So it's just he's 3 steps away from being a Nazi. And so if you can identify these people with AI, people who are potential Nazis, then we can get them before they become Nazis. And we could send the cops to the door and say, we know that you are very close to being a Nazi, and watch it. And we're watching you. We can send him to re-education classes, how not to be a Nazi. We can, make him call a parole officer every week and say, I haven't been a Nazi this week so far. We can do that. Why would that not happen? Why would the politicians of each new generation not build on what the politicians have done before them? Now, you could say, Eric, you're exaggerating, but I'm not the only one who's saying this, and it's not new. This has been discussed in America. We've discussed this since 1776. Since the First Amendment, since we decided that free speech, it has to be absolute. That if we start restricting speech in one political direction, then the politics can use it to restrict in another direction. That's why we have such radical free speech laws in America, because they can be abused. Once you start down that slippery slope of restricting free speech, you will end up abusing it. We've had this discussion in America, and it's a valid discussion, and it's realistic because we see it happening in Germany today with the expansion of anti-free speech laws and this absurd number of police cases brought to people just for saying something stupid online. And of course, it's not only the politicians who have warned against it and talk about it. It's science fiction writers have talked about this all the time. Philip K. Dick, this is all predicted. This is all science fiction writers have always said. When AI comes and can predict who is a good person and a bad person, that will be abused by politics. That's the warning. And that's kind of what we're heading for now when we're monitoring chat messages made by people. That's clearly a basis for heading in that direction. And of course, there's 1984. George Orwell predicted it. It's realistic. He said that that's what's going to happen, and it's happening. This is not just a fantasy. It is realistically possible. We have laid the groundwork. Now, you can also argue, Eric, you're conflating two issues. There's the issue of wokeism and the general moral discussion about how evil certain groups are, just as the groups themselves. And you're conflating it with laws, legal policy, and politics. And those are two different things. But that's the problem. That's the thing that I can't stop thinking about. Because on the abstract, on the lower level, on the level of how this works, they follow the same pattern. It's the pattern of making people guilty by default and using that to pass laws which give the state or the elite or the powerful more tools, more privileges, more potential to control the little guy. And at the same time, it gives the little guy more restrictions, more problems to worry about, more triggers to avoid, more lines to worry about crossing, more ways to stumble into something and make their lives miserable, less opportunity to do what they want to do and to have a good life. Rather, they have to worry all day long about not getting in trouble with the state while going about their lives. And that pattern is the same in laws like anti-free speech laws in Europe, in digital services, and in the general moral vilification of certain identity groups for woke reasons. It's the same thing. Because, the guys up there, the politicians who are doing this, the ladies of the View, millionaires, all of them, who say men are worthless, they go home. They're not getting in trouble. Their men are super rich. Their men are not suffering from this. Their men are not being called into the HR human resources office because some woman said, he was looking at me funny. They don't suffer from this. The Elon Musks, the Trumps, the Gavin Newsoms, all these guys, they don't suffer from these these woke moral changes in our society. They don't suffer. Who suffers is the little guy. It's the little guy. It's the guy who, who doesn't like working with his female colleague because, who knows what will happen, and he may have to go to HR. He may say something that she doesn't like, and he'll go to human resources. It's the mother who can't take a picture of her child. It's the man and woman, the boyfriend and the girlfriend who can't talk about politics because as soon as he opens his mouth, he might say something that the woman gets upset about and will break up with him about because he tends a little bit more to the conservative and the women as a woman tend more to the liberal. It's not the woman who cuts off contact with her family because dad votes for Trump. It's the dad and the mother who have given their entire lives to try to give their little girl a good life. But now she's not coming home for Thanksgiving anymore because someone told her that, you have to cut off contact with mom and dad if they vote for Trump. So it's not the guys up there who are suffering. It's the little guys down here who are suffering. Well, okay, so I've gone on and on about this, and maybe I'm a little paranoid but I see a pattern. If you look at the larger picture, there's a pattern. There's a pattern that the state and the elite, the powerful, they're not only getting richer and richer, they have more and more privileges. They have more and more things that they can do. They have more and more, laws and opportunities at their disposal. They are expanding their potential for doing what they do. While at the same time, the little guy below, his potential is decreasing. He's getting more and more restrictions, more and more things to worry about, more and more traps that he can fall into. More and more privileges are being taken away from him. The space he has as a human being to try to carve out a fulfilling, satisfying, halfway happy life, he's seeing his potential to be able to do that shrinking more and more. It's the squeeze.